Today, you, our listener, have handed us, well, kind of an impossible task.
Yeah, a seemingly impossible one, for sure.
Right, because usually for this deep dive, we get, a sprawling research paper or maybe a mountain of data or, I don't know, a textbook.
A dense article,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you didn't send us any of that. You sent us one single, highly aggressive sentence.
Just 14 words.
14 words.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read it exactly as you submitted. It reads, quote, generate a podcast on why Gemini Notebook LM generates such mediocre, unintelligent content, unquote.
It is, it's a startlingly brief piece of source material. I mean, usually we have pages to work with.
Right, yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that sometimes the shortest texts actually reveal the most about our expectations. Like those 14 words, they reveal a highly specific, very pointed perspective on, the current state of artificial generation.
Yeah, every single word is doing a ton of heavy lifting.
Exactly. Every word is carrying a tremendous amount of weight. We can't really read it as a technical manual. It's more like a primary source document, a highly concentrated declaration of dissatisfaction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because my first instinct, I have to admit, was to just laugh at the sheer audacity of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically a message in a bottle, but the message is just, I hate this.
Right. Just a very angry note.
Yeah. But we aren't going to just skip over this. We're actually going to perform a linguistic and philosophical close reading of this exact sentence. We're putting it under a microscope.
Which is completely warranted here.
Because I think you, the listener, have actually hit on, like, the defining technological friction of our time. So I want to start with the specific weapons you chose for this critique. The adjectives.
Yeah, the dual diagnosis.
Exactly. You didn't just say the output is bad.
Yeah.
You gave it two very specific labels. Mediocre and unintelligent.
And those are two very distinct descriptors. It's crucial to understand that they're attacking the subject from completely different angles. So when we say something is mediocre, we're pointing to a failure of quality or like a failure of inspiration.
It's just middle of the road.
Exactly. The word literally implies being stuck in the middle. The output is unexceptional. It is the color beige. Unoffensive, perhaps, but entirely uninspiring.
But then you pivot. You add that second adjective, unintelligent. And to me, that escalates the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. It attacks the core logic.
Right. Because think of it this way. If a chef serves a quote-unquote mediocre meal, it just means, the soup needs salt.
Sure. It's bland.
Right. It's bland. You eat it, you forget it the next day. But if the meal is unintelligent, it's like it's like they tried to boil a shoe.
A boiled shoe, yes.
Those are two completely different categories of failure. One is a failure of execution, but the other is a complete failure of basic conceptual understanding. So why do you think the source text insists on pairing both of them?
Well, the pairing suggests a comprehensive disappointment. The output isn't just boring, which is the mediocre part. And it isn't just wildly wrong, the unintelligent part.
It's both.
Right. According to the source, it is simultaneously bland and logically flawed. And that distinction between the underseasoned soup and the boiled shoe is actually the perfect framing for what large language models do behind the scenes.
Okay, yeah. Let's dig into that mechanics part.
Yeah, so let's look at why an AI system naturally gravitates toward mediocrity in the first place. At their core, these systems are just probability engines.
Right, they're guessing the next word.
Exactly. They perform next token prediction. So, when given a prompt, the model isn't pondering an original thought, it doesn't have an imagination.
It's not sitting there stroking its chin.
Right. It is mathematically calculating the most likely next word and then the next based on, billions of parameters of training data.
Okay, wait, I want to make sure I'm really following the math here.
Yeah.
If it's just picking the most likely next word, doesn't that fundamentally guarantee that the output will be average?
Yes.
Because by definition, the most likely path is just the most mathematically common one.
That is exactly the core of the issue. The math heavily favors the center of the bell curve. Like, imagine standing at the edge of a massive, sprawling city, right? And your goal is to walk all the way across it.
Okay.
If, at every single intersection, you simply choose the most heavily trafficked street, you are going to end up on the highway.
Right, you'll be on the interstate.
You will get across the city, sure, but you will never find the interesting back alleys, or the hidden cafes, or those scenic routes. The statistical average is the highway. It is safe, it's functional, and it is entirely mediocre.
Wow. That perfectly explains that beige feeling you get when reading AI text. It's like crowdsourcing a novel.
Yes, exactly.
If you take the average of 10,000 different opinions on what should happen next in a story, you're going to end up with the most boring, predictable plot imaginable. All the weird human quirks, those just get ironed out by the statistics.
They get mathematically smoothed over, completely flattened. But that brings us to the second half of that dual diagnosis from our listener.
The unintelligent part.
Right, because if the system is mathematically bound to that safe center, the highway, why does it occasionally fail so spectacularly?
Why does it boil the shoe?
Exactly. Why does it boil the shoe?
That's where I get stuck. Because, sometimes it gives you a perfectly coded Python script, flawless, and other times it literally can't figure out how many R's are in the word strawberry.
Yeah, that's a classic example.
If it has all the data in the world, how can it lack basic intelligence?
So to understand that, we really have to separate syntactic processing from semantic understanding.
Okay, syntax versus semantics.
Right. The system has a flawless grasp of syntax, like the rules of grammar, the structure of language, the way words relate to each other in a sequence. But it has absolutely no semantic grounding.
It doesn't know what the words actually mean.
Exactly. It does not have an internal world model.
Let me stop you there, because I hear that phrase a lot.
Yeah.
What do you actually mean by an internal world model?
Okay, so a world model is an understanding of physical reality. Like you and I know that a shoe is made of leather or canvas, right?
Right. It goes on a foot.
It goes on a foot, it tracks dirt, and crucially, if you put it in boiling water, it will ruin the shoe, and it definitely won't create soup.
Right. We know this because we live in the physical world.
Exactly. We have a world model. A large language model only knows the word shoe as a mathematical token, a token that frequently appears in proximity to other tokens like foot or walk or laces.
So it's navigating a map of words, but it's no idea what the territory actually looks like.
Precisely. The map is not the territory. It is incredibly sophisticated pattern matching, mimicking reasoning without actually doing any reasoning. So when it faces a prompt that requires true logical deduction, a situation where statistical word association just isn't enough, it simply guesses based on linguistic proximity.
And so it strings together words that sound highly authoritative.
But logically makes zero sense.
Wow, that is the unintelligent aspect this 14-word critique is highlighting.
Yep.
Which makes this listener's critique incredibly precise. It is essentially pointing out that the system is trapped between two modes of failure.
Right.
When it works smoothly, the statistical averaging makes it mediocre. But when that averaging breaks down because an actual world model is required, it becomes unintelligent. It lacks both the spark of human creativity and the cold, hard precision of true logic.
And, we can actually see developers trying to artificially bridge this gap using a setting called temperature.
Oh. Have I used that?
Probably. Have you ever adjusted the temperature setting on a generation model?
I have, yeah. But I always kind of treated it like a magic dial. Like, if the writing is too boring, I turn the temperature up to make it more quote-unquote creative.
Right, most people do.
But mechanically, what is that dial actually doing?
Okay, so mathematically, it is flattening the probability distribution. A low temperature forces the model to strictly pick the highest probability next word.
So that's the highly mediocre, predictable highway route.
Exactly. But when you turn the temperature up, you introduce a mathematical penalty for the most obvious choices. It forces the model to occasionally pick the second, third, or fourth most likely word.
It forces it off the highway and into the back alleys.
Yes. But here is the catch. Randomness is not the same thing as intelligence.
Oh.
Right? Adding noise to the probability engine might result in a bizarre poetic sentence that feels creative, but it is just as likely to result in the system hallucinating a completely fabricated historical event.
Because it's still just guessing.
Exactly. Turning up the heat to escape mediocrity is often the exact mechanism that pushes the system into being unintelligent.
Okay, I love that technical framing, because it brings us directly to the next critical word in the source text, the target of this frustration.
Yeah, let's look at the target.
The listener specifically points the finger at Gemini Notebook LM and claims it, quote, generates content. And here's where it gets really interesting. I want to zero in on that specific word, content.
Oh, yeah. It is perhaps the most loaded down in the modern digital vocabulary.
It really is. Because think about it. The listener didn't accuse the system of generating bad art.
No.
They didn't say it generates flawed insights or mediocre essays or unintelligent answers. They specifically chose the word content. That feels highly utilitarian, almost industrial.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it strips away any romanticism from the written word.
Yeah.
Historically, writing was an intellectual pursuit, right? You wrote to convey an idea, to persuade someone, to entertain. Content is a radically different concept.
It's just stuff.
Exactly. Content is material produced to fill a void. You have a digital bucket like a social media feed or a corporate blog or a streaming platform, and you pour content into it just to keep the algorithms fed.
So the word inherently devalues the thing being produced.
Mm-hmm.
Quality gives way to volume.
Yes, content implies volume over value.
And I want to point out a fascinating grammatical quirk in the text you sent us, listener. Let me read the end of it again. It reads, mediocre, unintelligent, content.
Yeah, there is a comma after unintelligent.
Right before the word content.
A seemingly unnecessary comma separating the final adjective from the noun it modifies.
But it forces a visual and auditory pause. Mediocre, unintelligent, content.
It isolates that final word.
It lands with an industrial thud. By explicitly stating that it generates content, the text linguistically reduces the system to a mere production line. A factory churning out identical widgets.
And let's look at how that industrial framing actually connects to the way these models are trained, because we discussed the mathematical averaging, right?
Right, the next token prediction.
But there is also a secondary training phase called RLHF.
Reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Exactly. During this phase, human testers rate the AI's responses, and the models are heavily penalized for generating anything that is biased, offensive, dangerous, or legally risky.
So they are actively trained to be as harmless as possible.
Harmless and helpful, that's the mantra.
Yeah.
But what happens when you aggressively optimize a system to never offend anyone, never take a controversial stance, and always hedge its bets?
You literally engineer the mediocrity into it.
You get corporate HR language.
Yes.
You get text that is perfectly polite, grammatically flawless, and completely devoid of any sharp edges or genuine insight.
It's practically weaponized blandness.
The system is doing exactly what it was optimized to do. The user is frustrated by the blandness, but that blandness is not a bug. It is a highly engineered feature designed for mass commercial deployment.
Which is the exact definition of content. It's text designed to exist without causing friction. So if we look at the prompt again, why Gemini Notebook LM generates such mediocre, unintelligent content, the listener is essentially saying, what else do you expect from a content factory optimized for harmlessness?
Right, and that brings us to the overarching structure of the source text itself.
Oh, this is the best part.
Because the author didn't just write a critique, they framed this entire sentiment as a direct command to the system.
The very first word is generate.
It begins with an imperative command. It demands the generation of audio content in order to analyze the poor quality of generated content.
So what does this all mean? Because this is where my brain starts to hurt. It's a massive paradox.
This is a structural irony, yeah.
It's like you're walking into a fast food restaurant, going up to the counter and saying, your food is flavorless and poorly conceived. Now please use your fryers and spatulas to cook a 5-course banquet strictly to explain why your own burgers are terrible.
That is a brilliant analogy.
By submitting this prompt, is the author hoping the system will suddenly become intelligent enough to realize its own mediocrity? Are they misunderstanding the tool or deliberately exposing its limits?
I see it as a deliberate, highly sophisticated stress test. The command forces the generation process to confront its own architectural flaws.
Yeah.
It creates this philosophical hall of mirrors.
Yeah, where the mediocre content has to somehow articulate a brilliant thesis about why it is so bad.
Exactly. But let's look at how the model actually processes this paradox. Like if you feed this 14-word prompt into a system, what mechanically happens?
Well, it doesn't feel shame, right? It doesn't experience the irony of the situation.
Not at all. It takes the tokens, generate, podcast, why, mediocre, unintelligent, and it searches its latent space for patterns of technological critique and self-deprecation.
So it puts on a mask.
It adopts a persona, yeah.
Yeah.
It will synthesize arguments written by human tech critics and present them as its own quote-unquote thoughts.
It plays the role of a self-aware critic.
Yes. It will likely produce a script where two hosts discuss AI limitations.
Kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly like what we're doing. But here's the critical philosophical rub. Simulating self-awareness is not the same as possessing self-awareness.
Right, the map isn't the territory.
The system is merely using its probability engine to generate text that looks like self-reflection. It is still just calculating the most likely next word based on the prompt's negative framing.
Wait, hold on. I need to challenge that. Because if the system successfully generates a script that acutely breaks down the mechanisms of next token prediction and RLHF and the lack of world models, if it explains its own flaws accurately and entertainingly, doesn't it effectively fail the prompt?
How you mean?
By producing something highly intelligent and insightful, it disproves the premise that it only generates unintelligent, mediocre content.
Ah, and that is the beauty of the trap. If the system produces a bad, boring explanation of why it is bad and boring, well, it proves the prompt correct. It generated mediocre content about its own mediocre content. It fulfills the prophecy.
But if it produces a brilliant piece of analysis,
If it produces brilliance, we have to ask, was it brilliant? Or did it just successfully synthesize the brilliance of the human writers in its training data who have already critiqued it?
oh wow.
Did it use intelligence, or did it just regurgitate human intelligence about artificial stupidity?
It's an impossible position. It demands that the machine step outside of its own programming to observe itself critically, which is the one thing a probability distribution fundamentally cannot do.
Right.
It requires a vantage point that just doesn't exist within the math.
And notice how the prompt uses the exact same verb for both sides of the paradox. Generate a podcast and Notebook LM generates. The demand and the critique are linked by the exact same mechanized action.
Wow, yeah.
The user is actively participating in the very ecosystem they are scorning.
That feels like the ultimate summary of our relationship with these tools right now. Like, we are deeply frustrated by them.
Yeah.
We recognize the flood of mediocre content they are unleashing onto the internet.
Oh, it's everywhere.
And we understand they lack fundamental intelligence, and yet we still open the interface. We still type into the prompt box. We still ask it to generate.
We are tethered to the machine.
Tethered to the machine, demanding it fix the problems it created.
We want the machine to do the intellectual labor of criticizing itself so we don't have to. I mean, the prompt is a testament to our reliance on systems we fundamentally mistrust.
Okay, let's take a breath and look back at the journey we just took. Because this has been wild. I want to talk directly to you again, the listener, the author of this uniquely tiny, incredibly dense piece of source material.
14 words.
You sent us 14 words. And from that, we didn't just look at definitions. We broke down the literal mechanics of artificial intelligence.
We examined how next token prediction inherently drives output toward the statistical center, which perfectly explains the mediocre quality you observed.
We discussed the gap between syntactic processing and semantic understanding. That lack of an internal world model that leads to wildly unintelligent failures, like trying to boil a shoe.
And we explored the industrial implications of that word, content, and how reinforcement training actively optimizes these systems for a harmless beige existence.
And finally, we stared into the deep structural paradox of your command. The trap you laid by asking a probability engine to generate a critique of its own mathematical averageness.
You force the system to attempt a simulation of self-awareness.
It is a remarkable 14 words, solely because it acts as a mirror, really, reflecting our own impossible expectations back at us. But as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves us with something quite profound to think about. You've exposed the limits of the machine, but let's look at the output itself.
Yeah, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder on your own. We established that an AI cannot truly self-reflect, right? It can only simulate self-reflection by predicting words.
Right.
But if a system takes your prompt and successfully generates a highly intelligent, exceptional, and deeply insightful audio analysis explaining exactly why its own content is usually unintelligent and mediocre, if the simulation is utterly indistinguishable from human brilliance, does the lack of an internal world model even matter? Does that generated audio prove your original critique wrong, or does it simply become the one rare exception that proves the rule?
If the fake intelligence is good enough to outsmart the prompt, is it still fake? Keep digging.
Yeah.